The first thing that comes to mind with the Ascension is, what? What? There are a few biblical images that have that picture, but not much. If this were a seminary class, someone would have their hand up saying, is this going to be on the final? Do I have to know this? From a purely logical standpoint, one would think that the Ascension would rank right up there with the resurrection. Yet, how many times in the last 5 years has Ascension crossed your lips or your mind? And actually, today's not even Ascension Day. That was Thursday. So we have a choice. We could celebrate Ascension Sunday or the seventh Sunday of Easter. So imagine what would happen if we didn't celebrate the Ascension. We probably wouldn't even know it's there. What is this Ascension about? That's the question. Now, the picture that comes to mind comes from Lake Wobegon. Garrison Keillor tells about a group of Lutheran pastors who came for a day in the country as part of their small town ministry conference. Pastor Inquist, I say that quite right, asked Wally to take them out on the lake on a pontoon boat for a day of enjoyment on the Agnes D. And so 24 Lutheran pastors and a few kegs of beer, they were Lutheran after all, got on the Agnes D. And as they got on, the boat began to get lower and lower into the water. Well, as they had gone out a little ways, Wally put about a half can of lighter fluid on the charcoal on the grill. And as the heat rose, the pastors began to move to the other side of the pontoon boat. And as it became even hotter, they moved further away until the boat began to tip a little and water started to come over the edge. And someone yelled out, "We're sinking!" And immediately 24 Lutheran pastors rushed to the other side of the boat, jerking the boat up and tipping it over, sending 24 Lutheran pastors into their first attempt to understand total submersion. Well, these ministers stood in the water that was 5 feet, faces upraised into the blue, bright sky, in prayerful apprehension. 24 pastors standing up to their smiles in water, chins upraised, trying to understand this experience and the deeper meaning of it. Now that's a picture of Ascension. Looking up, going, what? Like most scripture, we have this need to lock it up, to figure it out, to define it, to make sense of it. Well, good luck here. There is no lockdown here. To argue the historical factualness of the Ascension is not to achieve a more accurate picture of Revelation, but it is to distort it. God doesn't desire to prove that he can defy the laws of gravity, nor is God trying to identify the place of heaven up in the sky somewhere. Instead, God is clarifying that something important happened in Jesus, and now something new is at hand. This answers the question of what happened to Jesus after the resurrection. And it reconnects Jesus to God in a complete way. That's part of what the Ascension means for us. Let me give you an example. Elizabeth Barrett Browning said of her beloved Robert, quote, "He lifted me up from this drear flat of earth where I was thrown." We know what she means. He touched her heart and he gave her new life. She doesn't mean he came and he picked her up and lifted her off that flat earth where she was. He's speaking poetically. Luke is describing something for us that's unique. Jesus is now in a more expansive state, a fuller state. The Ascension is not the province of physics or astrophysics, but it is the province of theology and truth in a fuller sense. And that's enough. Luke tells us that in Acts, Jesus was taken up in a cloud. It is a cloud we know. It is the cloud that led the Israelites in the desert for 40 years. It was God's presence guiding them by a cloud. We know this cloud. It's the same cloud that was covering Mount Sinai when Moses went to get the Ten Commandments. It is the same cloud that came down on the Mount of Transfiguration. Being taken up in a cloud means that Jesus is taken up into the presence of God fully. The Ascension is meant to bring you comfort, not confusion. Now, another part of what that means is that Jesus has now gone full circle. We read in scriptures how when Jesus came, he emptied himself of all of his rights, his authority, all of that, the godness. And now after he has successfully completed his ministry, it's come full circle, and he goes back with all of the authority that he always had. He's no longer limited by earthly things. In Luke's Gospel, the Ascension completes the ministry of Jesus. It is time for blessings and farewells. In the book of Acts, the Ascension is the prelude to the beginning of the ministry of the church. In Luke, it closes the Gospel. In Acts, it is a prelude. Some things have to end before other things can happen. That's how life is. Sometimes we get fixated on those ends, but without the ends, there can be no beginnings. It's kind of like graduation. I remember 3 graduations. Now kids have 12 or 15 graduations. When I graduate from first year of preschool, second year of preschool, senior year of preschool, I remember 3 graduations. One is from high school. What I remember is I sat next to a girl I had never seen before in my whole life. And we had probably 1,000 kids in the class. By graduation time, maybe 800 or 900. So that's not really surprising, but it was surprising to me at the time. My graduation from Michigan State University. I remember, it was in the stadium, it was huge, huge number of people. I remember getting a helium balloon and tying it onto my cap so my grandmother could see sort of where I was. I remember graduation from seminary. This was it. School was done. Now I had to go out, get a job, get a career, find out how to live on my own. Now there was a solemnness about this. I mean, it was great to graduate and to see all my friends graduate. But there was a solemnness about this. It's like, okay, now it's going to get real, dude. Now it's going to get real. The Ascension is kind of a graduation for Jesus in his ministry. It is also a graduation for the disciples and for us. Now it's going to get real. Now we take on the work that was Jesus's. This was a mystical event for Jesus. It was also a mystical event for the disciples and for us. Your life in faith will contain some mystical experiences. Unexplainable stuff. Your job is, one, not to be afraid, to experience. And secondly, it is simply to be a witness. This is how God came to me. Your job is never to be those who have to convince. That's where Christians get weird. Well, one of the places where Christians get weird. We feel like we need to convince them whatever it is that we know to be true or think to be true. Reverend Grace and Matthew pointed out the importance of Jesus taking his disciples to Bethany for this ascension was that Bethany was a safe place for Jesus and the disciples. It is a place they went often. It is a place they found rest and refreshment. It is a place they found relaxation. It was a home away from home for Jesus. It was the place where Mary and Martha and Lazarus lived. Jesus' closest friends. It's where he often went. It's a safe place. Part of what the ascension happening in Bethany means for us is that we need to be clear about where our safe places are. Where is our sacred space? The places we are open to hearing what God has for us. For us to have sacred moments, maybe we need to find our sacred space. Where are those sacred spaces in your life? Where do you find those places that were significant? Those are the places where you need to go to wait for God's word for you. Sir William Osler was a brilliant, brilliant doctor. He was also a man of great compassion. He taught in England and Canada as well as Georgetown University Medical Center. He discovered diseases that were named after him. I'm not sure I'd want that, but he was an important person. But he was at his absolute best when he was with someone on a one-to-one basis. One day he went into a children's ward of a hospital in London. He noticed at one end all the children were playing and having a good time. But he looked at the other end of the room and he saw there was one little girl sitting on her bed all alone, clutching onto a doll. So he asked the nurse what that was about, and the nurse told him that this little girl, her mother had died not too long ago. Her father came in and brought this doll to her, and then no one else ever came to see her. And so because no one came to see her, it was like the children saw her as someone who didn't matter. So they ostracized her, gave her a hard time, and she was often alone. Well, he then went to the little girl and said, "May I sit down?" And then in a voice just loud enough for all of the other children to hear, he said, "Oh, I can't stay long, but I so badly wanted to come and see you." And her little face lit up as their ears perked up. Then he asked about her and about her health, and he asked about the health of the doll. He took out his stethoscope and he listened for the heartbeat of the doll. When it was time to leave, he said in a loud voice, "We'll remember our secret, and remember not to tell anyone." Then he walked out of the ward, and after he had gotten out, he turned and he looked around and saw all those kids surrounding her and her doll. The ascension is the story God has for us. It's the secret that God whispers to us. It's that which knows us to be important, that lights us up. That whisper in your ear that says, "I am with you." Ascension lifts us up as it did him. When Charles Lindbergh was making that crazy flight across the Atlantic, he came upon a fierce Atlantic storm. It was impossible to navigate through it. He turned that fragile Spirit of St. Louis in one direction. It was worse. He turned it back in another direction, and it was stormy there too, and he didn't quite know what to do, and so he began to lift it higher and higher until he found that space above the clouds where there was calm. There was vision. The ascension calls us to those calm places in our lives. And as with Charles Lindbergh. It's not always easy to get there. It's not always easy to get there. But God is there. God is calling us to go higher, to brave that which we have never tried before, to find that calm and that peace that is there for us. The Ascension is about Jesus, but it's also about us. It calls us to go higher. Find the place of God. Find a calmness, a spirit of peace. It calls us to a safe place to wait until the power of God comes, directing us to the ministry that is ours. May we find that calm place. May we know the whispers of God. May we wait till God's Spirit comes. So we remember the ways that God has taken us, lifted us up from the difficulties that have come our way, brought us calm and brought us peace. We call us forward and we give.